They called her the Virgin Queen, but behind the golden crowns and majestic portraits, Elizabeth often hid secrets that even history could not bury. In her final days, Richmond Palace no longer smelled of glory. It smelled of fear, loneliness, and decay. They say the woman who had commanded armies and destroyed empires refused to sleep, fearing that slumber would take her forever. She spent nights standing still, her eyes fixed on the void, as if she could see something no one else could. Some claim she whispered forbidden names: Robert Dudley, the man she loved but could never have; Mary Stuart, her cousin and rival, whom she ordered beheaded; and even her own name, as if the mirror had become her greatest enemy. In the dark corridors, servants whispered that Elizabeth's spirit was already wandering before her death. The woman who had turned England into a world power now watched her body wither and her mind be consumed by a torment few dared to describe. Was it guilt? Was it regret? Or simply the weight of a life lived in the shadow of power and deceit? Stay until the end of this video, because the final revelation about the Queen's last moments will leave you completely stunned. And before we begin, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It's not just a symbolic gesture. YouTube understands that when you engage, you want to see more stories like this, and it helps keep alive the memory of the secrets time tried to erase. So comment below what surprised you most about the story of Elizabeth I, the queen who defied love, faith, and fate itself, and ended up a prisoner of her own crown. Elizabeth Tudor was not born to be a queen. She was born to be a scandal, the daughter of a king obsessed with having a male heir and a woman who dared to defy the church. She came into the world in September 1533, surrounded by expectation and suspicion. Henry VIII believed that Anne Boleyn would give him a prince, but when he saw little Elizabeth's face, the silence in the palace was deafening. There was no music, no fireworks, no celebration, only the tense gaze of a disappointed king and the forced smile of a mother who already knew that the love of a powerful man lasts less than the promise of a throne. From the cradle, Elizabeth lived under the shadow of a curse. Her parents' love was forbidden, and the price of that passion would be paid in blood. 3 years later, Anne Boleyn would be accused of adultery, witchcraft, and incest. Absurd crimes fabricated to justify the fury of a king who already had another woman in mind. On the day of her execution, Anne looked to the sky and asked God to protect her daughter. Elizabeth, still a child, would never see her mother's face again. And as if the tragedy were not enough, she was declared illegitimate, torn from the heart of the court, and treated as a living reminder of her father's sin. She grew up among cold castles and severe tutors, learning early that in the Tudor court, affection was a luxury and survival an art. Even so, there was something in Elizabeth that no one could erase, a fierce intelligence and an almost dangerous curiosity. While other girls embroidered or learned to smile silently, she devoured books, spoke Latin, Greek, and French before the age of 10, and responded to princes and bishops with a clarity that intimidated adults. They said she inherited her mother's bright eyes and her father's ruthless temperament. She was, at once, the best and worst of both. And perhaps that is why she survived in a world where everyone wanted to see her fall. After Anne Boleyn's death, Henry VIII married several times, and Elizabeth watched her stepmothers enter and leave the court like disposable pieces in a political game. Some died mysteriously, others were executed, and few escaped with their lives. One of them, Catherine Parr, was the only one who truly cared for her. Under Catherine's protection, Elizabeth smiled again, studied again, and began to feel like she belonged to something, but even that brief breath of tenderness would be threatened. After the king's death, the young princess was exposed to new intrigues, new dangers, and a court hungry for power. Still a teenager, she already understood that every word could be a trap. She learned to speak much while saying nothing, to smile without trusting, and to feign innocence while observing every move of those around her. This ability, this perfect mask, would become the foundation of her survival when destiny began to test her limits. But not even Elizabeth's talent for avoiding danger could protect her completely. At 14, she lived through one of the most controversial and painful episodes of her youth. After Catherine Parr's death, her stepmother's husband, Thomas Seymour, uncle to young King Edward VI, began visiting her at suspicious hours. Contemporary sources claim Seymour entered her chambers at dawn, made inappropriate jokes, and approached her in ways that scandalized even the most loyal servants. Elizabeth, ashamed and confused, tried to distance herself, but the scandal erupted. Seymour was arrested and executed, and the young princess's reputation was forever tainted. It was at that moment she understood the true weight of being a woman in a world ruled by men. Any misstep, any rumor could destroy her. From then on, Elizabeth mastered the art of protecting herself behind coldness. She never again allowed anyone to see her weaknesses. When she spoke, her words were measured. When she smiled, calculation hid behind the charm. Every gesture was rehearsed, every emotion disguised, and behind this fierce self-control grew a quiet ambition to one day rewrite the destiny that had been denied her. But what truly shaped the future queen was not the blood in her veins, but the wounds the world inflicted upon her. Elizabeth grew up learning that love and power could never coexist, that tenderness could be fatal, and that the heart, once exposed, becomes a target. It was this rejected girl, the daughter of a beheaded queen and a tyrant king, who would become the most feared and admired sovereign in English history. And it is precisely at this point, between the scars of childhood and the awakening of womanhood, that a new phase of her life begins. A phase where love and politics intertwine dangerously, and the name whispered in secret through the palace halls would return to haunt her heart. A man who would become both her ally and her curse. When Elizabeth ascended to the throne in 1558, many believed destiny had finally smiled upon her. The rejected daughter, marked by her mother's tragedy and the intrigues of the court, had become the most powerful woman in England. But power, for her, never meant freedom. On the contrary, it became another form of prison. And within the golden walls of the palace, what tormented her most were not political enemies or foreign kings plotting against her, but one man, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. He was everything her heart could not have: young, charismatic, loyal, and above all, married. Elizabeth had known him since youth, when they were both prisoners of a cruel court. They had grown up together, sharing fears, secrets, and glances that spoke what words never could. When she became queen, she made him her favorite. Robert was the man always by her side, the only one allowed into her chambers unannounced, the only one who could make her laugh when the weight of the crown seemed unbearable. But their love was a danger that could set the entire kingdom ablaze. In 16th century England, a woman in power was already a scandal, a woman in love, a threat. Elizabeth knew that any romantic entanglement could destroy the image she had fought so hard to build, that of the Virgin Queen, the untouchable woman who belonged only to England. And yet, everyone saw the unmistakable light in her eyes whenever Robert entered the room. Foreign ambassadors reported to Europe the growing scandal in London. Rival courts mocked her behind closed doors, saying that the English throne was ruled by a woman's heart. Then came the event that changed everything, the death of Amy Robsart, Robert's wife. In September 1560, she was found dead at the foot of a staircase, her neck broken. Officially, they said she had fallen, but no one believed it. Witnesses spoke of a sad, isolated woman who seemed to live in fear. Some claimed she had taken her own life, others that she was murdered to clear the way for the Earl to marry the Queen. When Elizabeth received the news, she locked herself in her chambers and wept for days. not only for the tragedy, but for what she knew would follow. The scandal, the suspicion, the shadows. Her name and Robert S. would never again be spoken together without Amy S. ghost between them. Amy Robsart's death turned their love into an unhealable wound. Elizabeth never dared to marry Robert, fearing the people would believe her complicit in the tragedy. Yet she kept him close, promoting him, showering him with titles and honors, calling him my eyes, my Robin, in secret letters that read like confessions of a doomed love. She needed him, and he needed her. But both knew that what bound them together was also what destroyed them. As the years passed, Robert became the constant shadow of Elizabeth's reign. When he left for military campaigns, she grew ill with anxiety. When he returned, the entire palace trembled with their reunion. The people whispered that the Queen's love made her weak. Her counselors urged her to marry a foreign prince to secure succession, but Elizabeth never married, not out of pride, but out of fear. Fear that marriage would once again make her a prisoner. Fear of losing the control she had fought her entire life to achieve. Robert, in turn, wavered between loyalty and frustration. He loved the Queen, but also loved the power she embodied. And even after remarrying, he never stopped orbiting around her like a planet caught in the sun's gravity. When he died in 1588, just before the defeat of the Spanish Armada, he left her a letter she would keep until the day she died. It was simple, handwritten, with no seals or decorations, just a farewell. When asked why she always kept it with her, the Queen replied, "Because after this, nothing else comforted me." The story of Elizabeth and Robert is that of a love that could never exist, and perhaps because of that, it never died. A love made of distance, silence, and memories that echoed through the palace halls. She was queen of an empire, but a slave to a feeling she dared not name. Every look, every restrained gesture, every unspoken word was a battle between the heart and the crown. And in the end, the crown won, but the price was steep, because all power comes at a cost, and hers was solitude. Elizabeth chose the throne over love, and though the world called her the Virgin Queen, only she knew what that truly meant. A life without sharing, without touch, without solace. Only the weight of gold, jewels, and memories. And they say that until the end of her days, when she walked through the palace halls, she would sometimes stop suddenly, look into the void, and whisper, "Robin," as if his ghost still followed her. But the Queen's fate was far from complete. If love had brought her torment, politics would bring her blood. For the next shadow to cross her path would not come from her heart, but from another crown, that of her own cousin, a queen who would challenge her to the very limits of reason. If Elizabeth was the queen destiny shaped through pain, Mary Stuart was the one born wrapped in glory. From the cradle, Mary carried the brilliance of Scottish nobility and French blood. She married as a child, was crowned queen before she even understood the meaning of power, and grew up surrounded by adoration and promise. While Elizabeth fought to prove she deserved the throne, Mary was showered with applause and reverence. But destiny, which often delights in the ironies of history, was preparing a duel that would divide not only two women, but two worlds. Elizabeth was the face of Protestantism and political reason. Mary, the symbol of Catholic faith and passionate impulse. Two queens, two religions, two kingdoms, and one throne that could not hold them both. The two never met face to face, but their lives became entangled in letters, rumors, and conspiracies. While Elizabeth ruled with caution and restraint, Mary let her heart lead her choices. Widowed at 18, she returned to Scotland with her disarming beauty and her frightening temperament. She married again, this time to Lord Darnley, a man as ambitious as he was violent. The marriage quickly became a nightmare, and when Darnley was murdered under mysterious circumstances, Mary was accused of involvement in the crime. The people turned against her and forced to abdicate. She fled Scotland, seeking refuge in England, the realm of her cousin, whom she had always considered beneath her. Elizabeth received the news with unease. To accept Mary was to welcome a fallen queen, but also a living threat. For Europe's Catholics, Mary Stuart was the rightful heir to the English throne, the perfect alternative to the heretic queen who ruled London. Elizabeth knew her cousin was dangerous, yet she could never bring herself to completely hate her. There was a quiet admiration between them, a distorted mirror in which each saw what she herself could have been. Mary saw in Elizabeth the power she had lost. Elizabeth saw in Mary the freedom she never possessed. For nearly 20 years, Mary Stuart lived as a prisoner in English castles, surrounded by luxury but devoid of freedom. Elizabeth, even under pressure from her council, hesitated to condemn her. She feared not only the political consequences, but also the moral weight of ordering the death of someone bound to her by blood. Yet the game of power was merciless. In 1586, a plot known as the Babington Conspiracy was uncovered, a plan to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the throne. The evidence, still debated today, suggested that Mary had known of the plot. For the English Queen's counsellors, there was no longer any doubt. The Scottish Queen had to die. Elizabeth resisted as long as she could. She spent sleepless nights rewriting orders, delaying decisions, searching for any reason to avoid the irreversible. But pressured by the Crown, the Church, and public opinion, she finally yielded. In 1587, she signed her cousin's death warrant. As her pen touched the paper, she is said to have whispered, "God, forgive me for this." Mary was beheaded at Fotheringhay Castle, and witnesses said she met death with grace. She dressed in red, the colour of martyrdom, and as she climbed the scaffold, she murmured a prayer for Elizabeth. When the axe fell, the silence was so deep it seemed to cleave the kingdom in two. To the world, Elizabeth had triumphed, but inside her something shattered. After the execution, she locked herself away for days, refusing audiences, food, even her own reflection. She never spoke Mary's name again, but in the years that followed, her servants noticed moments of distraction when she appeared to speak to herself. "I see her," she would whisper. "She comes covered in blood." In her final years, Elizabeth confided to those close to her that she dreamed of Mary repeatedly, dreams in which the Scottish Queen walked toward her holding a blood-stained handkerchief. Some said it was guilt, others merely the toll of solitude. The rivalry between Elizabeth and Mary Stuart was never just political. It was personal, spiritual, and profoundly human. Two women who defied destiny, only to become prisoners of it. Elizabeth survived, but never freed herself from the shadow of the cousin she condemned. And perhaps that is why, in her final days, as she looked into the mirror at her tired, aging face, she could no longer tell where the Queen ended and the ghost began. But the throne demanded she go on, even with a broken heart. And so, through loss and regret, the Virgin Queen faced the twilight of her reign, a time marked by omens, delirium, and the slow approach of death. Elizabeth built her image with the precision of a sculptor and the coldness of a general. From the very beginning of her reign, she understood that the throne was not a gift, but a trap, and that every gesture, every word, even every glance would be judged. It was then that she created the myth that would make her immortal, the Virgin Queen, a woman who belonged to no man but to an entire nation. "I am married to England," she would say, with that mix of irony and authority that confused subjects and ambassadors alike. That phrase became her armor, a shield against the humiliation so many women of her time endured. But behind the crown, the gold, and the carefully measured words, there was another Elizabeth, a woman of flesh, of desire, of secrets that time almost managed to bury. While the world saw her as an untouchable goddess, Within the palace walls, rumors never ceased. Some claimed her heart still belonged to Robert Dudley, even after his wife's death. Others believed that, amid the political intrigues, the Queen had allowed herself new passions, discreet and dangerous ones. There are records of letters sent to Thomas Heneage, Christopher Hatton, and even Francis Drake, the famous privateer the Queen affectionately called "my pirate." None of these relationships were ever confirmed, but the diaries of courtiers mention lingering glances, late-night meetings, and smiles that betrayed the stern image of a woman who pretended not to know what love was. The court lived on appearances, and Elizabeth mastered this game like no one else. When a Spanish ambassador tried to ask whether she would consider marriage, she replied with provocation, "How could I give myself to a man when my heart already belongs to my people?" Everyone applauded the answer, but few realized that behind the irony lay a genuine fear. Elizabeth had grown up watching women destroyed by men, a mother beheaded, stepmothers betrayed, princesses humiliated. She loved power because she saw in it the only way never to be a victim. And public celibacy became her most effective weapon. The more she denied love, the more the world desired her. Yet even a queen is not made of iron. In private letters, some preserved, others mysteriously vanished, there are traces of a woman divided between duty and desire. An Elizabeth who wrote of sleepless nights and memories that burned. Some historians believe she had at least one secret affair, perhaps more, protected by a network of loyal courtiers who kept her confidence until the end. There are even theories that she became pregnant in secret, that a child was sent away to live outside the court, far from the eyes of history. No solid proof ever emerged, but the rumors persisted through the centuries. What's most curious is that Elizabeth seemed to enjoy those suspicions. When told she had a hidden son, she smiled and said, "Then may he govern well if it's true." It was as if she delighted in provoking the world, keeping everyone guessing about who she truly was. At the same time, this image of a mysterious, unattainable woman served her political goals. No foreign prince dared attack her. They all dreamed of winning her hand. She turned her love life into diplomacy and her heart into a weapon. Still, there were moments when the mask slipped. In some portraits, her eyes looked tired, sad, almost human. The flawless skin concealed scars, perhaps from illness, perhaps from regret. And while the people celebrated the Virgin Queen, inside the palace, she lived surrounded by portraits of the past, memories of men who had loved and feared her. Records tell that on certain nights, Elizabeth would order old songs to be played, the same ones she once danced to with Robert Dudley, and she would remain alone for hours in silence, staring into the void. Was the Virgin Queen truly a virgin? Perhaps that never really mattered. What mattered was that she turned doubt into her fortress. While everyone tried to decipher her, she ruled. No man ever tamed her, no enemy ever toppled her, and no confession ever drew from her what she kept locked in her heart. That was Elizabeth's genius, turning mystery into power and solitude into a symbol. But time, relentless as ever, began to demand its price. The years passed, suitors died, allies disappeared, and even the mirrors of the palace seemed to turn against her. The same eyes that once captivated the world now reflected a weary woman, haunted by all she had to deny in order to remain on the throne. And as the palace candles went out one by one, the Virgin Queen began to face what she feared most: old age, death, and silence. The end of Elizabeth. I did not come like a storm, but like a slow sunset. The woman who had ruled with an iron hand, who had faced armies, betrayals, and impossible loves, began to fade away in silence. There was no longer music in the halls of Whitehall, no laughter at the banquets that once dazzled ambassadors and princes. The Virgin Queen, now nearly 70, lived surrounded by memories, faded portraits, yellowed letters, and the echo of names time had taken away. Robert Dudley, Francis Drake, William Cecil, all were gone. And with them, the voices that had sustained the myth. The throne, once her altar, had become her burden. Elizabeth no longer wished to rule. She no longer wished to be queen. In her final months, she refused the doctors who tried to ease her pain, the food that was offered to her, even sleep itself. She spent entire nights awake, sitting on the cold floor of her chambers, motionless, as if waiting for something she could not name. When asked why she would not rest, she would answer with a faint smile, "Rest, the dead rest." It was as if she feared that closing her eyes would mean never opening them again. The jewels that had once symbolized her power had become invisible chains. She still dressed in her royal gowns, but the stones no longer gleamed. They reflected only the dim flicker of candlelight. Servants whispered that she saw ghosts, her mother, Anne Boleyn, her love, Robert Dudley, her rival, Mary Stuart. And sometimes at dusk, Elizabeth spoke softly to herself, as if conversing with all of them, asking for forgiveness or offering her defense. Her once tall and commanding body began to fail. She walked bent over. Her once golden hair had thinned, and the face that had once embodied strength was now a map of fatigue and melancholy. But her eyes still burned. No servant dared meet her gaze, for even on the edge of weakness, the Queen inspired fear. Once, a bishop knelt before her, begging her to lie down, saying that God wished her to rest. Elizabeth raised her face, looked at him coldly, and replied, "Your dead sleep, I still live." The phrase echoed through the corridors like a curse. It was as though she refused to surrender her soul to time, as though she meant to defy death itself. But death was already there, waiting. Solitude had become her only companion. Foreign ambassadors wrote to their kings describing an aged monarch lost in reveries, surrounded by servants who wept in silence. No one contradicted her anymore. No one dared touch her. The English throne, once a symbol of glory, had become a gilded tomb. Elizabeth, who had defeated all her enemies, now battled the most relentless of all, the void. One of her final nights, she ordered them to bring the necklace Robert Dudley had given her decades before. She ran her fingers over the jewel and murmured something no one understood. Then she commanded that the lights be left burning. "So that he may find me," she said. Some servants swore that at that moment she was staring fixedly at the corner of the room, as if seeing someone. Perhaps it was Dudley's ghost. Perhaps just a memory projected by a weary mind. That night she once again refused to lie down. She said the floor felt safer than the bed, and she remained there, motionless, surrounded by shadows, until her body could endure no more. At dawn on March 24th, 1603, the woman who had turned England into an empire closed her eyes for the last time. No priest, no doctor, no confidant, only the distant toll of chapel bells and the soft crackle of candles. She died as she had lived, alone, mysterious, unbreakable. Some say she smiled before she went. Others claim she murmured something inaudible, perhaps one last command, perhaps a name. Her face, the servant said, seemed finally at peace. And so ended the 45-year reign that would forever shape the history of the world. When the news spread, London fell silent. Men and women wept in the streets. Even her enemies acknowledged the end of an era. For Elizabeth had been more than a queen. She was a symbol, a myth, a living idea of power and courage. And though her body was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, many believe her spirit never found peace, that she still wanders the palace halls, dressed in white, whispering commands to an empire she swore never to abandon. But death, for a figure like Elizabeth, is no ending. It is only the final act of a life woven from secrets, glory, and regret. The world never forgot her, and even today her name evokes fascination, fear, and wonder, because perhaps the true mystery is not how she lived, but what she thought when she was finally alone before the mirror in her last moments. 4 centuries after her death, Elizabeth Theo still has not found rest, and perhaps she never will. The Virgin Queen remains alive in the pages of books, on cinema screens, and in the imagination of those who try to decipher her. To some, she was the greatest monarch in English history, the woman who turned a fragile kingdom into a powerful empire, who faced and defeated the Spanish Armada, who defended her nation's sovereignty against countless enemies and ushered in a golden age of art, politics, and British identity. To others, she was a cold, calculating woman, shaped by solitude, unable to love without suspicion or to trust without fear of betrayal. A queen who hid behind her crown to escape the woman she truly was inside. The centuries have passed, but the questions remain. Who was Elizabeth Tudor, really? The brilliant strategist driven by an almost superhuman political instinct? Or the prisoner of the very myth she created to survive? Her name crossed generations, inspired Shakespeare, defied popes, and continues to spark debates among historians and psychologists. Some say she ruled like a man. Others insist she reigned precisely because she never ceased to be a woman and turned her femininity into her greatest weapon. What is certain is that Elizabeth was the mirror of England itself, unpredictable, proud, contradictory, and utterly captivating. Even with all the power she amassed, she remained a mystery. Her diaries were burned, her most personal letters vanished, and what survives are fragments, whispers, and interpretations. The myth of the Virgin Queen, built out of political necessity, still fuels speculation. Did she truly die without ever knowing physical love? Did she live secret passions the record books concealed? Or was her greatest secret something else entirely, that she feared vulnerability, like all the women she saw destroyed by the throne? Her image has been reinvented countless times. In cinema, Kate Blanchett, Helen Mirren, and others have embodied different versions of the Queen. The young and fragile dreamer, the calculating and invincible ruler, the aging and haunted monarch. None of them are false, and perhaps none are completely true. Because Elizabeth was not just one woman, she was many. The daughter of the executed queen, the lover who could never love, the enemy who won the war, the ruler who chose power and lost peace. If one thing endures in her legacy, it is fascination. Elizabeth was not merely a monarch, she was a living narrative, a story that continues to be told, reimagined, and rediscovered. Every generation finds something new in her: strength, ambition, courage, madness. And perhaps that is why she still seems to watch us from the height of her Renaissance portraits, with that knowing gaze, an expression that defies time itself. Eyes that, though dead for over 400 years, still command respect. But every myth, sooner or later, reveals its cracks, and Elizabeth's is no exception. Behind the glory lies guilt. Behind the power, solitude. Behind the official history, secrets that may never be revealed. And so centuries later, the world still asks, who was the real Elizabeth of Foom, the goddess or the woman? And it is at this point, between myth and mystery, that the life of the Virgin Queen ends, but not her story. Because some figures never die, they merely change form and continue to watch us in silence. And so we come to the end of the story of Elizabeth the Fain, the woman who turned love into power and power into legacy. 400 years have passed, and still her name echoes like an enigma. Perhaps we will never know whether she was a heroine or a prisoner of herself, whether she truly loved anyone or learned only to love the throne. What we do know is that no other queen has ever left a mark on the world quite like her. And maybe that's why, whenever we look back at history, it's her face that looks back at us, firm, serene, and yet filled with sorrow. If you've made it this far, it means you were touched by this story too. So before you go, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It is not just a symbolic gesture, it is what tells YouTube that you enjoy this kind of historical content and want to see more epic stories like this one. Every subscription and every like helps the channel keep going, bringing you more intense, emotional narratives filled with the mysteries and passions of the past. And tell me in the comments, what surprised you most about Elizabeth I? Do you believe she truly lived and died as the Virgin Queen? Or do you think there was much more hidden behind the legend? I want to know your opinion, and I promise I'll read every comment because your voice is part of this conversation that spans centuries. And if you were captivated by Elizabeth's tragic destiny, don't leave just yet. The video appearing on your screen right now is even more fascinating and full of revelations, a story of love, power, and betrayal that will send chills down your spine until the very end. Click now, watch it to the last second, and keep traveling with me through the darker side of history. Because, as Elizabeth herself once said, the dead may rest, but stories never sleep.